And tonight, the nuclear emergency in Japan continues, and the turmoil in Libya is at a boiling point. And finally today, after days and days of inaction, the Obama administration took some time to address these growing crises. Now, first on Libya, U.S.-supported no-fly zone resolution was approved by the United Nations Security Council. Now, the vote went down just a short time ago and authorizes, quote, all necessary measures to protect civilians in Libya, including airstrikes. And if you're keeping score at home, that means it took this White House 31 days to lay out a coherent strategy to address that situation. And on the disaster in Japan, President Obama took a break from golfing and filling out his brackets to visit the Japanese embassy in Washington. He also delivered a brief statement about the uncertainty surrounding the situation at the Fukushima nuclear plant this afternoon, but as usual, he refused to take questions from the press. So what took the president so long to grapple with all of these crises going on? Here with his take, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
It's good to be with you.
Well, first of all, let's start with Japan, which, we're watching all of this. He was out playing golf, and the tsunami hadn't even receded at the time on Saturday. He's taking time for brackets. He's meeting, all about St. Patrick's Day today. Your reaction?
Well, I think it's increasingly clear that we have a spectator-in-chief instead of a commander-in-chief. And I think each situation is very different. But the way in which, remember, this is in a background still of terrible economic news. It's in a background of rising gasoline prices. It's in a background where the deficit is enormous and he's showing no leadership on the budget. It is maybe the most passive and out-of-touch presidency in modern American history. He makes Jimmy Carter's micromanaging the tennis courts at the White House look tiny compared to the degree to which he's avoiding doing his job right now. And so I think you've got to go sort of item by item. On Japan, we ought to have a scientific commission made up of nuclear physicists and nuclear engineers, not politicians, not people who already have a predisposed opinion, but real experts to start digging into what has happened, what is happening, what are the implications for American policy. I think that's a very important first step. We've obviously indicated we'll do all we can to help the Japanese, and we should. I've talked to a number of people who are close to the American military who realize that we have considerable military assets and personnel taking some real risks to try to help the Japanese. It's a tremendous tragedy, and all of us should, I think, keep the Japanese in our prayers. This is the worst crisis they've had since World War II, and we don't know yet how bad it's ultimately going to be. So it's an enormous crisis.
All right, so we've got...
on Libya,
yeah.
Good.
Well, but I want to just stay on this. He's taking a trip, another vacation to Rio. He's played golf 61 times. He played the last 2 Saturdays. He's filling out his brackets and making a big deal about this. The only thing on his agenda today was meeting with people from Ireland, and that one quick comment that he made, fundraisers that he's been to. And you're talking about that he should have immediately set up a commission of some of the best, brightest, smartest nuclear minds and engineers in the country and help the Japanese out. But he didn't do it.
Well, he didn't do it. And if you look at Libya, on March 3rd, he said Gaddafi had to go. There's no evidence Gaddafi's going to go. There's no evidence that the no-fly zone by itself will be effective. Americans need to realize that once the American president has publicly said a dictator has to go, if that dictator survives, it's a considerable defeat for the United States. The whole region is in turmoil. You have problems everywhere from Bahrain. The Saudis may be drifting towards a confrontation with the Iranians. You have problems in Yemen, problems in Egypt, problems in Tunisia, problems in Libya. The president seems somehow to be disengaged. You had a terrible terrorist attack in Israel where a 3-month-old baby was deliberately killed by a terrorist in a very gruesome way. The United States basically has said and done nothing about it, even though the 3 children and the parents were massacred deliberately by a terrorist in a very horrible way. The administration is just sort of checked out. The president has this fixation with the Final Four, spent time on ESPN giving us his version of what really mattered to him, which was the Final Four. I like basketball. I think the president knows more about it than I do. He may well be right about Kansas, although I must say I have a personal affection for Duke, where my best friend from high school went to school and where they have a great coach. And I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for Duke winning. but Kansas is a great school, so maybe the president's right. But what's strange is, with all of these crises, how could you focus that kind of time and attention as president of the United States, not as a private citizen, not as a spectator, not as a hobby? I put out today my final four, and I said the final four for the president should have been: one, enough jobs to get unemployment down to 4%; two, enough American oil and gas production to get gasoline prices down to $2; three, balance the federal budget with a much smaller federal government; and four, control the border. Now, I would suggest to you my final four comes a lot closer to what a president ought to do than Obama's. And it makes you wonder what he thinks his job is.
Yeah, in that 31-day interim, up to today, Gaddafi said he was going to win, and that he's been using literally bombings from the air, a massacre of literally, we'll probably never know the accurate number. A slaughter has taken place. You mentioned the slaughter in Israel and the massacre. A 3-year-old child, an 11-year-old child, and a family is wiped out. Not a word, and the White House just sits passively. It's frankly a little shocking. All right, we're going to come back. We'll get your thoughts, the latest on where you stand in your potential run for the presidency, also on the economy. More with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, after the break. And with all the turmoil around the globe, some key domestic issues have been overshadowed in recent weeks. But today, two major votes took place on Capitol Hill. On the Senate side, yet another continuing resolution was passed that will keep the government open for business until April the 8th. And in the House, Republicans scored a major victory, voting to prohibit federal money from being used to fund National Public Radio. And back with reaction to all of this is former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. All right, Mr. Speaker, I want to give credit where credit is due. Republicans, the new Congress, said they would repeal Obamacare. They did. The next step, they said, if they couldn't get the Senate and President to go along, is they would defund it. Now, Politico has a story today. Some in GOP grow tired of the right wing. And there's a quote in there by a Republican congressman that basically says, well, there's some on my side that want to cut anything that moves. We have $4 billion in new debt we accumulate a day. $4 billion. And we found that the Democrats pre-funded $105 billion in Obamacare. They didn't want to go through the proper appropriations process. And 54 House Republicans said, no, that's not, we need to take that money out. Did they miss an opportunity with the pressure involving funding the government to take that money out?
Well, I think, first of all, that they've already eliminated 40 small federal programs in these two cycles with the continuing resolution. In a couple of weeks, you're going to see Paul Ryan, the chairman of the Budget Committee, unveil the most dramatic, the boldest budget in modern American history. I have no doubt that Congressman Ryan is going to set the benchmark for everybody who wants to cut spending. He's going to have entitlement reforms. He's going to have dramatic cuts in spending. And every Tea Party member, every fiscal conservative, every budget hawk in the country is going to have an opportunity. And some of them, I predict, will promptly say it's not enough, even though it will be by a big margin the boldest budget in modern times, much bolder than anything we did during the 4 years I was Speaker. And I think Congressman Ryan really understands what he's doing, is really committed to creating jobs, to developing American energy, and to balancing the budget. And he's going to drive towards that with enormous courage. And we'll see how many people are prepared for real spending cuts at that point. I do think that the freshmen came in dedicated to cutting spending, and they should. I'm talking to you tonight from New Hampshire, where they're in the middle of cutting spending in their state budget. And there's enormous feeling in New Hampshire that they want the federal government under control. They think Obama has been spending an extraordinarily dangerous and reckless way. And so I think they expect the Republicans to get this budget under control. And I think the Speaker, John Boehner, and Majority Leader Eric Cantor are absolutely committed to doing that.
I've interviewed all three of them, and Paul Ryan. I've interviewed McCarthy. Every time I've walked away fully confident that they want to fulfill every promise. I agree. I talked to Paul Ryan. We're still dealing with the budget in 2011. It gets a little confusing. This was the budget the Democrats should have passed when they had full control. They didn't pass it. And I am looking forward to bold spending cuts. Paul Ryan said he will deal with entitlements. They will do the hard work that Obama put off, because Obama didn't deal with any of this when he put forward his budget. But I will tell you, there are some that are getting pretty antsy. fiscal conservatives and saying, well, wait a minute here. A big part of our promise is defunding Obamacare. When can that happen then? And how does that happen if you?
Oh, I think it'll look. I think it's clearly going to happen in the Ryan budget. I suspect the Ryan budget will also include the defunding of and the elimination of Obamacare. I'm actually doing a press briefing tomorrow at the National Press Club on getting rid of Obamacare on behalf of the Center for Health Transformation. We're totally committed to getting rid of Obamacare. The country is overwhelmingly committed to getting rid of Obamacare. And I think that you'll see this gets worked out. I'm not trying to second guess either the Tea Partiers, who are legitimately militant and legitimately suspicious, nor am I trying to second guess Speaker Boehner and the leadership team, who are trying to handle a complex situation. You know, they have a Democratic Senate still. They have a president who is far more radical than Bill Clinton ever was. So I think they're in a different environment. What I do believe is that they're going to come out with a budget which is extraordinarily bold and which is going to be very different from anything we've seen in our lifetime. And I hope most conservatives are going to give Paul Ryan the benefit of the doubt, rally to passing that budget, and make clear that the real choice isn't between a lot of cutting and even more cutting, but the real choice is between dramatic cutting and Obama's gigantic spending. And I think that's the real choice for this year.
I think that, as Mike Pence has been saying, I like the line, the fight has got to come. They've got to be willing to pick the fight. And I hope they're not going to be intimidated by fear of shutdown. But if they do all the things you're saying, I think there'll be broad, sweeping support. All right, last question. Where do you stand in this? I see you smiling. In your potential run for the presidency? Where are you now?
We're making a lot of progress. We had a very good day today here in New Hampshire. There are a lot of people going to newtexplore2012.com. We're testing to see if we have enough financial support and enough volunteer support. And I would say so far it's going very well. And Callista and I are monitoring it every day. We're also in the process of taking our 4 small businesses and putting them in shape that we could, in fact, run. And I suspect in a few weeks you'll have an answer, maybe about in parallel with Ryan or just a little bit after his budget. But we certainly have had a lot of very positive support here today, as we did last Monday in Iowa. And we're going to continue to work to reach out, to test the waters, and to see whether or not there's grounds for a dramatically different candidacy.
Last question.
That would challenge Obama head on.
For those that say we now have to rethink nuclear power in this country, I know you led the drill here, drill now, pay less. It's one of your final 4 issues. What do you say to those that may question or politicize, because of the tragedy in Japan, the use of nuclear power in this country?
I say we need a scientific commission of nuclear engineers and nuclear physicists, not politicians, not ideologues, not left-wing extremists, but a scientific commission. And we need to get at the facts. The truth is, the Japanese government doesn't know the facts yet. The American government doesn't know the facts. And I'll guarantee you that Ed Markey and other anti-nuclear extremists don't know the facts. And I'm prepared to say, let's let the facts tell us the truth. If the truth is that there's something fundamentally flawed, then those of us who have been pro-nuclear have to look at that. If the truth is that the system can be fixed and that with some reasonable steps, nuclear power can be made safe, then those who are rabidly anti-nuclear ought to be required to face that. But let's have scientists and engineers, not politicians, tell us what the facts are.
Mr. Speaker, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it. And we'll be waiting for your announcement in weeks to come.